Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books, and today we're finally going to be doing my April wrap-up. I actually had a fantastic reading month in April and I'm really excited to share all of these books and my thoughts about them with you. I ended up reading or DNFing 10 books. We have a couple of DNFs to talk about this month, which is actually really exciting because I am glad that I am seeing that I'm able to put down books that I'm not enjoying. That is a good thing. Let's just dive right into it, and I'm just going to go in order that they were read because why not? So the first two books that I read were part of the How to Train Your Dragon series, and that was books 11 and 12. So that is How to Betray a Dragon's Hero and How to Fight a Dragon's Fury. Now these ones are the much more sizable at the very end of the How to Train Your Dragon saga, and if you haven't seen already, I have done a full series review, so you can go and check out that video if you want my fully fleshed out thoughts on the series as a whole. This is a middle grade story. There are 12 books in it and I am so chuffed to say that I've now finished them. This was a present for Christmas from last year. So it's a huge tick to have ticked all 12 books off my TBR. Both of these were 5-star reads, as were many of the books in the series on the whole, and they were just brilliant. I think my favourite was book 10 in the end, but these were still brilliant as well. You get the real emotional arc as you're following Hiccup and his friends through the final stages of his quests and journeys, and I'm not going to spoil anything for you, don't worry, but these books are phenomenal and just as fun as all the other ones. Most of the books sort of follow an independent quest, a new adventure for the characters to go on, but as we get to these last few books here, you see how they all come together into one final conclusion and how important all of the little learning curves have been on the way. So these were brilliant and 5 stars each from me. Now the next book was a bit of a spontaneous read. I say that as if I had some sort of agenda. I'm not working on TBRs at the moment. I am for May. That's a special condition. But I have been taking a break from TBRs in general. Nonetheless, I hadn't anticipated reading this as soon as I did. And that was Daughter of Sparta by Claire Andrews. This is obviously a sort of Greek myth retelling. It is mixing together Sparta and Greek myth. Not that they exist mutually exclusive from each other, but this is a really great feminist twist on a story. Now this is following I think a character who does appear in Greek myth, but it really had it felt like Greek myth adjacent, as if Claire Andrews had mixed in something that wasn't usually seen alongside the likes of Apollo and whatnot, but I don't think that's true. There's a really lovely foreword at the beginning of this explaining that the character Daphne is a victim in the original story, and Claire has taken it with this feminist twist to make her sort of a hero who's got a lot of things going for her. I really enjoyed the feminist undertones of this, but more of I really enjoyed like the classic Greek myth adventure setup. This has everything you want. It's got all of the gods, it's got Apollo, it's got Artemis, it's got all of them really. I genuinely think most of them appear at some point for some key role. Apollo is the main one in this story, and he is starring alongside Daphne in the story, shall we say. I don't want to give too much away, but essentially Daphne gets herself tangled up with a quest from Artemis that she simply has basically no choice to back away from, and a lot of things are on the line, and this comes just after she's tried to prove herself to her people. She's sort of not a Spartan by birth and therefore never really accepted into her community, and even more so she's a woman, so even though she's really great at fighting and women can fight in Sparta, there's still a bit of a stigma as to, you know, women coming after men at the end of the day still. So this was brilliant. If you're looking for a story that has that quest set up where there's just lots and lots of little challenges that are just propelling the character forward throughout the narrative until they reach this big goal, then this is definitely one to pick up. I loved it. This was even better than expected, so obviously this was also 5 stars from me. The next book I read was actually a short story, and I've managed to get myself a little free trial of Amazon Prime, because usually I just leech off the rest of the family, as I think many of us do, but I've been enjoying having my own little access to it, and of course Prime comes with Prime Reading. It amazes me how many tiers of subscriptions Amazon manages to build, but in any case there's like a selection of free books. I don't know why they've got Prime Reading and then like Kindle Unlimited. Doesn't matter, because what they did have in the Prime Reading was Kate Quinn's newest book. Well, it's her novella called Signal Moon, and I've been really wanting to read this because I love Kate Quinn. We know I love Kate Quinn, and I was really excited to just sit down and like power through it because it was available for free, so that was a big win. 5 stars, obviously, because it's Kate Quinn. What else were we expecting? I couldn't get over how enjoyable this one was, actually. It's only about 50 pages long, and it is a really sweet war story, as all of her books are, as far as I'm aware. So this is about a girl in the 40s who's on the radio signals, trying to decode things. It's not a Bletchley Park story, which is what the Rose Code is, one of her other books. This is something a little bit different. It's a lesser known, lesser famous, is that an expression? You know what I mean. Part of the war and the code breaking, and it's actually a bit of a sci-fi because she manages to pick up a signal from an American radio person on a boat. I can't remember the official terms for these things. From the future in 2023. Yeah, it is set in 2023, and that was really cool. So it's sort of about her knowing that she picked up a signal from the future and he's in danger, and them trying to work together to figure out how this is working, how it's possible, and how she might be able to save him from his doomed fate. It's so cool. If you have Amazon Prime, I really, really recommend going and have a read of this. It's just 50 pages. It's super short, but oh my god, I'm not much of one for short stories, but this is definitely a good example of why they are worth reading. Told a lie before. I rated Daughter of Sparta 4.5 stars, but you know, potatoes, potatoes. The next book I read was also another Amazon Prime reading, that's what it's called, that thing. And that was an Agatha Christie, because I do love my Agatha Christies. And this one is Murder in Mesopotamia. This had a really cool setting. I mean, it's got the same sort of Oriental vibes, if we want to call it that, as things like Murder on the Orient Express or many of the other ones that are set in the Middle East. I actually find it fascinating how many of her books seem to be set around the Middle East, I guess because during the time she was writing that was common practice for people to work or live in those countries because of colonialism. Anyway, side point, this was actually really good. I rated this 4 stars. It's not my favourite Agatha Christie, it's not my least favourite, it's just solidly in the middle of a really great murder mystery. This one is not actually told from Poirot's perspective, it is a Poirot story. It is told from a nurse's perspective who is sort of hired and brought into this archaeological dig, not the site, but where they're billeted, where they're living whilst they're on this dig, and she comes in to help look after the main honcho's wife, who's just, you know, Mrs. Bennet level of wrecked nerves, and she's trying to work out what's going on, and it's her recounting the story of what she saw and her experience with Poirot when there is inevitably a murder that happens and she gets to watch him do his work and his thing, and so it was interesting. It was nice to have something a little bit different where we're getting the sense and the vibe of a Hercule Poirot murder mystery by ours truly, Agatha Christie, but from a different perspective to just liven it up a bit. So this was really great and I really enjoyed it. I definitely rate this one. I then read a book for work, which is If I Should Lose You by Natasha Lester. Obviously I'm not going to review this one just because it is for work, but this is a really interesting story. It's general fiction sort of set in contemporary times, and it's a real heart-wrencher. It's a story about a mother with a really sick child, and the mother works as a nurse in the transplant department of a hospital, and her daughter just happens to be needing a transplant, a liver transplant, and so it's sort of about work and her private life getting like messily mushed together and her seeking sort of escapes to cope with the whole thing. It's quite a heavy read, it's quite an intense read, but it is a beautiful read at the end of the day, so that's all I will say. Moving on. The next book I read was a big chunky one, and I read this for the Tandem Collective read-along where a bunch of people got together to review it, and that is Silver in the Bone by Alexandra Bracken. This is my second, I think it's my second Alexandra Bracken book, despite owning quite a lot of her other ones. I've read The Darkest Minds before, and she also has written Law, which has been really popular, and another one which has a pirate ship on the cover, but I can't remember what it's called. This one is an Arthurian legend retelling, and I am always there for one of those. This is really fun. It's a little bit more of a modern twist on it than, well, actually I've read some pretty modern twists, but anyway, it's a modern twist on it. In this one you've got 2 characters, the main character and her brother, and they are orphans, so they're not actually brother and sister, but they've been raised as such, and they've got each other's back, and her brother is cursed to turn into a werewolf, or just a wolf, but I'm going to call him a werewolf. And so the main driving thing of this plot is her determination to try and break the curse so that he can live a normal life, because it's very hard for him to control it, and particularly if emotions are high, he just transforms and he can't remember anything, and he's just like, rah, killing everyone. Which is, you know, not great. So that is the driving factor behind this plot, but of course we are going to get deeply entrenched in fun ways in Arthurian legends, and also with like family issues as she tries to nut out who she is and like why her brother's mean to her when she's trying so hard to help him, and why they were abandoned by their carer after already having been abandoned by their own families, and traveling to other places / realms to get involved with myth. It's really fun. This is a real page turner, and there's a good collection of interesting characters. Oh, and of course there's like an enemies to lovers vibe going on. There's her rival who's from like the hoity-toity end of town, very rich, very privileged, called Emerus, and he just kind kind of won't leave her alone, and she's just like, please leave me alone, Emerus, and then he's just always there in the way, and she's just exasperated. But of course there's so much to unpack between the two of them, and it is thoroughly enjoyable. So this one I rated 4.5 out of 5 stars, pretty high rating, can't wait to continue the series. Now the last book that I actually finished in the month was a faux love story by Lone Lee. That's how you pronounce her name. I read this whilst I had COVID, so it was sort of my comfort read. I loved this book. This was beautiful. This is one that Chris bought for me, and I just, if you're looking for like quite a meaty contemporary romance, this is fantastic. It's about two Vietnamese families who have a restaurant. They've both opened up on the same street, and it's swapping between the perspectives of the two children who are still living there. So that's Lin and Bao, and they are just adorable. Both of them are adorable. I loved them so much. They're so awkward and beautiful. Neither of them really understand the history behind the rivalry between their parents, but they have always respected it. And there's a lot of soul searching and answers being sought in this, as the two of them just sort of unavoidably do get involved in each other's lives in various capacities, and it is a really charming read. I really, really enjoyed this. This is probably a contemporary romance that I've enjoyed the most that hasn't been a queer romance. I love queer romances. They're always, well, many of them are written really well. I've struggled a lot more lately with just like hetero romances in YA fiction, but thankfully there was no toxicity in this, and there were some really great themes that were explored, which has honestly been refreshing, which is a bit sad to say. In any case, I rated this 4 stars, and I will absolutely be keeping my eye on what the author is going to bring out next, because I want to read it. And that brings me to the 2 books that I DNF'd this month. So I have been battling with the Zookeeper of Belfast since Christmas, so for like 4 or 5 months now, and I've just not been getting there, and I sort of got, I was determined to finish it, and then I got to about 60% I think through it, or 70%, and I just realised that it wasn't going anywhere fast, and I actually really didn't enjoy it. I felt that the author got the balance wrong for what the book was presenting as in terms of seriousness and enjoyable reads. This was very much so presenting as sort of a, here's a war setting in a zoo and there's going to be an elephant, and there's like a bit of a feminist vibe to it maybe, but the feminist vibe was non-existent and like obviously lacking, I would say, and it got really graphic in terms of injuries when bombings happened. It's set in Belfast, and I just thought that I wasn't expecting it. I don't mind it in war fiction. Obviously it's kind of like a, you know, part and parcel with some stories, but it just didn't feel like it had place in this book in particular. And so there was just a lot of things that just felt really off, and the pacing was not working for me. So I decided to put this one down and move on with my life, and I'm glad I did. I had a really quick flip through to the end, and managed to reassure myself that nothing exciting was really going to happen, and I just didn't need to know the end of that book. So done, gone, put down. Thanks but no thanks. The next book I DNF'd was disappointing and surprising, and that was Priscilla by Christopher Paolini. Now, I've mixed feelings. I struggled to read Aragon. I loved Eldest, and I wanted to pull my eyes out when I read this one because it was so boring. I did like To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, which is the beginning of his next series, and I'm going to read Fractal Noise, which is the sequel. But I'm a bit nervous now because I have lost faith in, like, my ability to trust his writing, or just lost faith in his writing, I suppose. I got halfway through this and I was finding myself putting off listening to the audio, which is how I was doing it, because I tried reading Aragon in a book format and I couldn't do it. Like, I just couldn't hold my attention, and I found audio better, so I think Priscilla book format wouldn't make this better. I didn't like the narration. I think this was the worst out of the 3 narrations. The voice the narrator uses for Saphira is weird. You get used to it, but it's weird. But it just felt like he had no life inserted into this narration, and that definitely helped kill this for me. But I mean, I read half the book and it's like, what, 800 pages, and honestly nothing happened. It was so much talk and so much lore, and it was just totally out of whack. I found the pacing of Lord of the Rings more tolerable than this, and that I think says it all. So this was a DNF at the 50% mark for me, unfortunately, and that means I will also be DNFing the rest of the Inheritance Cycle series, which I'm really shocked because I can't believe that I'm saying that, but I am. Life is too short to pursue series that are just that tedious. So that was my April. This is a very late coming wrap up, I apologise, but I had a really good month. That's 8 books read. That's quite unheard of for me. I've been going at a roaring pace, and 2 books DNF, so that's really good. I'm so impressed with myself. Well done me, claps for me. So let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these, but other than that, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.